Hey everybody, what is going on? It is Brian. We are back, and I have Drew P with me. So normally we're live on Thursday nights doing live streams of Inch Proof Live. We can also have some of those archives going to the Inch Proof Podcast, inchproofpodcast.com. But Drew was in town, and we decided to do some videos. You're going to see some content bounce back and forth between the channels. Tonight, what I wanted to do, specifically while Drew was in town, was bring out some pours that, are the kind of things you want to share with people.
Hitters.
Some hitters. And I was gifted a sample of last year's 2021 Michter's 20 that we decided also to throw it up against in a blind the Four Roses Visitor Center 20 that you've already previously seen me talk about. I'll throw a link up here to that video. And I'll end up doing a roundup also of the Michter's 20 on its own. But right now, I just want to taste through these and kind of compare. Now, these are unicorn whiskeys for sure.
The corniest of unicorns. Really.
So, not really accessible, but one of them is significantly higher retail price and a significantly higher secondary price.
The Michter's one?
The Michter's 20.
Yeah, okay.
And so I'm not necessarily thinking that the Roses will beat it out. Would be cool if it does. Because profile-wise, the Four Roses is just an older-aged OBSV recipe. So I kind of want to just compare these to see what are some hyper-aged products from two different places, 20 years old, around the same proof. What do they taste like? I figured we could just break them down. So we've blinded these out. I've identified based on sample number on the bottom of the jars. Drew poured them out, so it's kind of a double blind. And we'll just go into them. We'll pour glass A. We'll do glass B as we talk through them.
Glass A. Cheers. Thanks, man. I'm stoked for this. Wow. Such an interesting nose. Holy smoke.
There's a lot of, for 20 years old, these are both 20 years old. There's a lot of sweetness here.
Yeah. The sweetness is like frosting, but more sweet. It's unbelievably perfumey. And I mean that in a fruity kind of perfume, but also big florals. If I was to guess, just knowing that Four Roses can lean really floral sometimes, and having not even sniffed the other one, I would be surprised if this wasn't Four Roses.
Yeah, it has a citrus essence. It has florality. It's got sweetness, and it doesn't have any burn. And honestly, it doesn't taste. It doesn't smell like an overabundance of oak. It smells like a nice amount of oak.
Correct. Yeah. And when I said perfumey too, it's like the best perfume, like the sexiest perfume that you would want to eat. Like that.
They still make edible perfumes, right? Don't they?
I would hope so.
It tastes like body glitter that you buy from adamandeve.com. Not at all sponsored by adamandeve.com, but
we would entertain that, yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and jump over to the nose on B just for the time's sake, and then we'll get into the palate as well.
Much oakier. Still super sweet.
Oh, this smells like a Dusty. Coming off of the content we're talking about Dusties. Absolutely. And going to neat.
We had 6 Dusties yesterday after our tasting and then our bar visit. This definitely nose-wise. It's
maple,
very reminiscent
caramel.
Of the Evan Williams 8-year-old from the 80s that we had yesterday.
Yeah. This is the notes that I normally would pick up on Dusty whiskey. Maple, salted caramel,
cola for me.
Cola, brown sugar, and a lot of oak. But in that oak, you get a little bit of there's some cherry, slightly medicinal, but it's a little bit of some cherry note in there too.
Buttercream City.
I've said before in the past, I feel like maybe it's just on Instagram or something that Michter's 25, Michter's 20, it's reminded me a little bit of King of Kentucky. This doesn't anymore. This is full on Dusty.
We're assuming that this is the Michter.
No. I'm just talking about. Yeah. I guess I am.
Yeah. Right.
I'm just meaning neither of these to me smell like King of Kentucky, which you all know is something I compare to a lot. This smells like a Dusty, and this smells like just a really sweet, older whiskey.
We'll go back to that on the nose. After hitting the Michters, going back to the nose on what I think is Four Roses. Granted, this is blind, even though we could be surprised. But the nose going back to the Four Roses, after getting the sweetness on the nose from the Michters, is a little bit more dank. I get a little bit more antique building. I called that out in which sample was the last one we had last night? In the sample Dusty lineup.
The Wild Turkey.
Yeah.
85 decanter.
Right. So I called old building out timbers and raw wood. And so this is leaning a little bit more raw wood in comparison to the Michters, which is more toasty, a little more barbecue.
So we're saying Michters. So we're saying.
We're not doing a very good job.
I do think this one. I think this one's a little softer on the nose for sure.
Yeah.
Again, similar proofs, barrel strengths. Presumably, this one's definitely more saturated on the nose.
Yeah, very robust. I could go swimming in this one.
If you're voting nose, which one are you voting for? Glass A, Glass B?
B.
Glass B, definitely. Yeah. Okay, let's go into palate. Cheers, sir. Cheers.
It's exceptional.
There's some oak there for sure on the palate.
Raspberries. It's got kind of a red fruit with a tartness. We got high notes and we got low notes. You're calling out the oak. That's there for sure. There's some brightness. There's even like fresh fruits almost. What kind of sweet?
Yeah, to me it kind of has like a raspberry tart, like desserty sweetness, but there's also like a slight bit of licorice note that mixes in. These notes sometimes get hard for me to pull apart. There's kind of a slight licorice note mixed with like a barrel char note that then goes into like a dark chocolate ganache and an oaky profile. But it moves really quick in those kind of low tones. But again, as you've heard me mention before, the kind of profile you'd pull out of Russell's 13, in some of like the Sam Houston 15, some of those well-aged products, they tend to hit these kind of flavor profiles of pops of fruit and then moving into a little bit of that spice, but basically a sweetened, charred, chocolatey oak finish.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned like there's a lot. I felt like there was a lot going on, so I don't feel like it evolves. I feel like you get hit with a lot of notes, kind of like
that would be accurate.
And then it just sits there. Then you're kind of left with this mouthfeel that's slightly effervescent. It's there for a while. For something being so old, it is finishing a little hotter than I would have expected.
One thing I like on the palate that it's doing, I do feel like you get some of that perfuminess that was on the nose. The longer it's sitting in this glass, I notice it on the tongue.
I'm going to save a little bit so we can come back to that.
All right, let's go to the Glass B. The nose is still just crushing it.
Yeah, that's an unbelievable note.
Interesting. There's the lower tone notes I mentioned in here are like the full sip of this.
Yeah.
It's a little medicinal. It's got a little bit of that anise fennel, actually a lot of that fennel-like character that then gets into char, chocolate, earthier kind of tones.
I was like maple, brown sugar. I think chocolate's a great call on this. The fennel didn't kick me as much. Like I see what you mean in that terms of sort of funky, woody, spicy amalgamation.
And I think what you're like. I feel like it can easily be called as cola too, like maybe a more classic type of cola. That's I don't know.
So the woody influence on this is really pronounced, and while up front it's brown sugar and maple, at the end it does sort of get into like just straight barrel char. It doesn't rest that way on the finish though. I get it at parts where it's like, wow, that is a lot of barrel. But then the finish goes kind of back to sweetness, and I actually want more. I like the finish on 2 better than 1 as well. So
I feel like what 2 is missing, what the Glass B is missing from Glass A, is that it's pretty hefty, it's pretty heavy. It has some of the characteristics I mentioned in Dusty whiskey before, except it doesn't have like a sugary sweetness. And I know that sounds weird because we're talking about brown sugar. It has a darker sugar sweetness. It doesn't have confection-y type sweetness to me. It doesn't have big, bright fruits.
No.
And I actually feel like I kind of actually wish it was there. I wish there was some of that there. It's a little too, it leans a little too low end toned for me, kind of. It's a little salty as it lingers on the palate.
I honestly love it. If you added fruit notes to it, we're talking about the all-time pour.
The best.
Yeah,
and maybe
absolute best. Because it's really
no. These are both good. We're being highly critical comparing just to try and tease out differences for people. I mean, going back to the nose on A is still pretty nice.
Yeah, the fruit on A is delightful. Not quite as crazy as that Blanton's 91 we had last night, but this has a little bit more oak.
I think at the very end,
after
I decide on these, I'm going to blend the 2 of them together.
Nice. That's a baller move.
This has some good fruit and sweetness. You are right. I just wish there's a tiny bit more char.
Let's do that. Let's save like a microscopic amount here and then blend them together for kind of a last sip. But we'll vote first and then blend.
Bam. The palate on the second glass is just enormous. It's rich. It's coating everywhere.
It's more what I like. I like one a lot, but if you're just saying which palate do you prefer, I mean, of course, I recognize the exceptional quality in both. I'm voting for B on palate, though. So B wins for me on nose and on palate, which we thought was the Michter's 20. Now I'm blending.
I think that nose wins on B for me. This is where I feel like I have to say, objectively, in this limited amount of time, I might say I prefer the palate of A, but B's the better. And I think that's what I'm going to go with.
I'm surprised. I would think you would lean, based on everything, all the tastings we've done.
All the things that we've done, I just think it's a little too heavy.
Really?
I think it's a little too heavy on that. But it's the rich, the coating, all that, very much enjoy. Yeah. It is better than A, for sure. But there's some stuff I just wish it had that A does have.
Yeah. So I blended mine now because of Brian's idea, which I
Well, you reveal the I will tell you what the bottom. So in the sample jar with 11 was the Michters. And in the sample 34 is the roses.
So we got it correct on our assumptions. That's good.
That this one was the roses and this was the Michters. I mean, pretty different from one another, honestly. It is kind of hard to compare the two.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind too, both Michter's 20s and all these 4 roses that released, they are all single barrels. So different Michters, even from 2021, could differ than the one we're trying. And same with results from these 20-year 4 roses. So,
do you know what the proof was on the Michter's 20?
This is the Michter's 20 was a 114.2, and then the 4 roses that we are tasting is 58.6, so 117 proof. So they're pretty close to one another. But I really
like what the blend.
I forgot to save it.
Oh,
I just threw it back.
I really like what the blend has done on the nose. The blending of that fruitiness and that oak feels really balanced now. Still equally sweet.
So combined, is it the perfect pour to you?
I mean, kind of, yeah. Because it does have both the fruitiness and the heft.
It kind of kills the nose actually a little bit. Nose isn't as majestic, but
it's
did we just create the best whiskey
ever? We just send it to Fred.
And that's it. And guys,
he tastes it up against Barrel Seagrass.
That's how you make the best glass of whiskey ever.
That's the video title.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I hope it was informational to you all. I hope it was kind of fun to watch through this. I think general summation, both great products. The Michter's 20 is definitely fantastic. I mean, one thing that I do like, which goes in line with what Andrew was saying, which was like the Michter's 20, the King of Kentucky, they hit a profile that I really like, which is modern day products that taste like dusty whiskey.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot that's out there like that. This 4 Roses did try, but it kind of tastes like an old roses.
Sure. Yeah.
You like roses, you like oak, you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Again, I hope the content was good. You guys want to hear some more about that? Then, bounce back and forth between our channel over the next couple of weeks. You'll probably get some more content from our trip here. If you want to hear me talk in depth about the Michter's 20, I'll have a review for that either up soon or I'll link it up here once that one is out. And again, my 4 Roses video is out too if you want a deep dive in that. If you all want to check out more content, check out the Entry Proof Podcast. We're live on Thursday nights, and the archives of those are at entryproofpodcast.com. If you want to support what Drew's doing on his channel, Drew P. Whiskey, or what I'm doing here on my channel, consider joining Patreon. That's patreon.com/entryproofpodcast. You get some behind-the-scenes footage, you get some cool swag, and you get access to our barrel picks. And from this trip too, I mean, we might have a slew of more picks that are going to be accessible to you all via the Patreon.
Fire.
Until next time, everybody, we'll see you all later.